Hello and welcome to my top 20 films of 2019 video. Finally. Holy shit. I can't believe it's taken this long. Definitely the longest time it's ever taken for me to sit down in front of a camera and just film a goddamn video about my favorite films of the previous year. Most people do this like at the beginning of December, which I never get because it's like, hey, there's still another month of the year to go. This is an incomplete list. This is based on the, you know, 11/12ths of a year, not the full whammy. But, people like to really get in there quick. And, there is something to be said for doing a top 10, top 20 list of everything you saw that year on the dot. January 1st, December 31st, no exceptions. But for me, there's so many films that I miss in the cinema. There's so many films that don't come out in the cinema but get like releases digitally on demand or on Blu-ray that came out in that year, and I usually go by the release dates as far as the UK or whatever country I'm living in. When I was in Norway, it was Norwegian release dates, so it's just one of those things. There's always a bit of wiggle room for me here and there. One of the films in my list is a 2018 film, but it didn't get released in the UK till January 1st of 2019, so for me it's a 2019 film. Is it a 2019 film? Like, technically, no. But for me and my list, it is. So there's a few things in here that might kind of raise a few eyebrows. Maybe a couple of things people haven't heard of. Maybe a lot of things people have heard of. I don't know. There's a fair amount of the usual suspects from 2019, which for me was an incredible year for film. I think in 2018 I watched over 100 films by the time I did my list, but this year's only been about 70. Even with this 4-month kind of period to catch up, I really didn't get to that many more that I wanted to. But I'm really glad that I waited until April of the next year, because one, we're in no rush because no movies are fucking coming out anyway. But two, because I got to revisit some films, which I was undecided about. Like, where do they fit in my list? Do they belong here? Do they belong there? It's fun. I like doing it every year. I think I've been doing this since 2011. Though I oddly can't find one that I've done for 2015, so I might have to go back and do that perhaps. But for now, it's the end of the 2010s. I did want to do like a top 10, top 25 best films of the 2010s decade. Maybe I'll still do that, I don't know. And I will be doing a top 30 damn good films of 2019. I did that for 2018 and I really enjoyed doing that. But I do ramble in these videos, I really get into it, and I'm trying to like keep myself down a little bit because I was looking at all my previous ones, like my top 20 films of 2016, 2017, 2018, and the running times and the views that correspond with that. Last year was the longest ever. It was like 1 hour and 8 minutes long, my top 20 of 2018, and the views dropped from the previous year. So I think that you guys want it shorter. I understand that, so I'm going to try and rattle through it as quickly as I can, which isn't to say that it will necessarily be quick. I have my letterbox list here, and if you want to pause and zoom in, you can't because most of them haven't even loaded yet because I turned the Wi-Fi off on my phone, but that's okay because I have everything that I need in the top 20. So yes, so I'm going to get into it. It's one of those things, I've been avoiding it for so long because it's like, I know it's going to take forever as well. So grab a drink with me. I got a nice Fireball Coke here. I'm going to relax, take a deep breath, take some water, and get on with the damn thing. At number 20, we have not a movie. Number 20, we have National Theatre presents Fleabag. This is something I went to the cinema to see last year. I had recently gotten into the... Oh no, maybe I saw it at the beginning of this year, actually. I think it might have been January of this year. But it came out in cinemas in 2019. It was a September, I think, of 2019 cinema event where it was beamed around the world. It was a theatre performance of Fleabag, written by and performed by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And it basically just captures that theatre performance and shows it in a cinematic form. But it's not exactly cinematic because it literally is 80 minutes of Phoebe Waller-Bridge sat on a stool on a dark stage. There is nothing else. It's just her painting this picture, telling this story. And, I'm sure this is what it's like for most theatre actors, but it was incredible. Did I love it as far as like the story was amazing and her performance was just like riveting? No, but flawless. Absolutely to a note. Flawless. I mean, she had done this years ago. This was kind of like her final run of performing the Fleabag show. She's got it down to a T, you know, and so confident and just effortless. And there's so much. I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's just like doing a movie in one go, which again is what theatre is. So it's not like I should be, wholly impressed by that, but I don't watch theatre, I don't go to theatre, so it's not something I'm overly familiar with. I'm sure people who are into all the classics and they love plays and that to them is real acting, they would look at Fleabag and go, oh, that's nothing impressive. I've seen people do that for 3 hours. Fair enough, but it's her holding it all herself. And what I found actually was that the funniest moments were when she wasn't saying anything at all. There were some really interesting things she did with the jokes that played out without words that were really brilliant. But I watched the show, loved it, watched both seasons, watched them both again with Connie. And so I loved the show, but I wanted to see kind of the origins. And it's slightly different than the show, a little bit darker, but the essence of it was there, and it was more raw. It was like watching like a caveman kind of perform. Not not in terms of how she looked or sounded or anything like that, but it's like this primitive kind of thing, just a person on a stool telling a story for an hour and a half, and it was brilliant. Number 19, we have Vada by Agnes, which I think I actually have right here at my feet, which I didn't plan, but there you go. Vada by Agnes. This is the final film from one of my favorite directors of all time. I think I've only seen like 5 or 6 of her films. There's many more to discover, but based on that, I'm in love with her work. She sadly left us, passed away last year. I think she was 91 years old. Absolute legend. I got to see her in person at the BFI a couple of years ago, which was wonderful. But Vada by Agnes was her final film, looking back on her career and her life as an artist, a visual artist, a filmmaker. It's stuff that she's done before and covered before in her previous documentary, The Beaches of Agnes, but Vada by Agnes is it's like the final word, and it's a beautiful final word. And if you're familiar with her, I think you'd really enjoy it. It's just, it's not among her best, but it's just like, I don't know, the way the film ends, which isn't really a spoiler because it's a documentary, but it's a shot from her previous film, Faces Places, where she's sitting on this beach with the young artist that she collaborated with on that film, JR. And they're sat on this beach, and there's just all the sand is swaying through the wind. It's like almost like a mini sandstorm. And her voiceover says, I forget what she says exactly, but it's about kind of fading away into the sand, and we see her and JR just disappear as the sand sways across the beach, and that's it. That's her final word. It's kind of beautiful, but it's also her giving these talks to people, and just the way that it's done is like anything she does. It's fun, it's inventive, it's fresh, and it's playful. And it sums up everything that's wonderful about her, that was wonderful about her, and will continue to be as we discover her films forever, I hope. Number 18 is The Irishman from Martin Scorsese. They said it wouldn't happen, they said it couldn't be done. He did it. Brought back Joe Pesci from retirement, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino. I mean, those 3 guys together in a movie is just like day one. Did I watch it when it came out day one? No, I didn't. It took me a while to get to this one, 3.5 hours long. I did watch it in 2019, but wow, what a film. Really interesting look at kind of the gangster lifestyle based on a true story, which for me makes it a little bit more unsettling, makes it a little bit more difficult to kind of get in to, living vicariously through these gangsters and stuff and trying to imagine what kind of a life that would be, because these are real people who, then there's people who get killed. And so it's a little bit kind of, grimy in that sense. But the film really portrays this kind of life of crime and what happens at the end of that. And it's not a pretty picture, and it paints it, Well, I guess that's the kind of the title that I'm not sure if Scorsese wanted to have the title, I Heard You Paint Houses, but when you watch The Irishman, it says on the screen, I heard you paint houses. There's no The Irishman on the screen when you watch this film, which is really interesting to me. Actually, it's almost like his little personal FU to perhaps Netflix and or whoever was producing in collaboration with them. But, it took Netflix to get this film done. I think that Robert De Niro is really great. Joe Pesci is phenomenal. Joe Pesci is like, right, okay, Joe Pesci, come out of retirement for this. Okay, now play completely against type. You're not going to be doing the Joe Pesci thing. We want the complete opposite of that. And he nails it. It's such a subtle and chilling and kind of calm, collected, cool performance. Al Pacino's really dialing into Al Pacino, which is a lot of fun. 3.5 hours didn't quite feel like it, I thought. In other ways, it did feel like it, but I really, really enjoyed this one. Number 17, in what might be the first of many eyebrow raisers throughout this list. Yes, above The Irishman, Terminator Dark Fate. I'm not even kidding. Is it as good as The Irishman? You damn... No, it isn't. It isn't as good as The Irishman, but I enjoyed it more than The Irishman. I'm a big Terminator fan. I enjoy all of them. Terminator 1, Terminator 2, fucking classics. Terminator 3, I enjoyed it. It reminds me of being a teenager a little bit. Terminator Salvation, I can kind of... I haven't watched that in a long time. Genesis, I really enjoyed. I couldn't really get past the kind of recasting and everything, but it was a fun little twist. It was what it was. Dark Fate feels like a proper third part. Not in the sense that, finally a Terminator 3, but, it felt more legit. And it gave me new characters to actually care about. The success of Dark Fate for me is getting behind the character of Danny and Mackenzie Davis's female Terminator character, and then bringing in Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger to support those new characters. I feel like this could have been a good new trilogy, but I like it the way it is. It's a nice kind of final note in a way. Wasn't designed to be, and I heard that, James Cameron and Tim Miller actually kind of clashed on this and they wouldn't work with each other again. So it is what it is, but I thought there were some really cool action set pieces in this film. From the trailers, it looked awful. The trailers were just abysmal. I wasn't even excited about it. When I was in the cinema once with a friend, the trailer played, and I think I turned and said, I feel nothing. Like, I can't believe I'm not excited for a Terminator movie, but I watched it just kind of like, well, it's Terminator. And I loved it. Maybe I need to watch it again, and the low expectations played into it, but I just really had a blast with this one. Number 16, El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, I believe it's called. And we should just call it El Camino, But anyway, this is the story of Jesse Pinkman, the epilogue in my mind to Breaking Bad, which is, pretty much pound for pound the best TV series ever made, though I will say I do think Better Call Saul is better, especially since the wrapping up of Season 5. A little bit better than Breaking Bad, I think, but the whole world is awesome, and El Camino is part of that, directed by Vince Gilligan. You get some cool cameos from Breaking Bad characters, and there's some flashbacks, and well, actually, almost half the movie's a flashback, but it's Jesse's story, his kind of, and people criticized this and said, at the end of Breaking Bad, spoilers, he's driving away free. And at the end of El Camino, he's driving away free. There's nothing that happens in the El Camino movie that makes any difference. No one seemed to get the memo that, there's so much more to character and story than just the physical actions of what they're doing. The end of Breaking Bad, he's driving away, like after, being held captive for months, screaming in release, but, he's kind of a wanted man. Where's he going to go? Who's going to help him? At the end of El Camino, he's driving away calm, completely at peace, and confident with where he's going next. It's completely different. And El Camino fills in that gap. It's what I would have imagined, like the final scene of El Camino is pretty much what I imagined in my head when Breaking Bad finished. That's where he's going to go. But to get that filled in was really nice. And pretty much everything they touch there in Albuquerque with Better Call Saul and the movie is just brilliant stuff. And, does it work as its own separate movie? Of course it doesn't. Not really. You need to have seen everything else. Maybe you could kind of enjoy it on its own merit, but really it's kind of just, it's connected to the whole world. And I think as a movie, it was fantastic. Nothing wrong with it. I really, really loved it. Number 15 is The Favourite. Boy, am I glad I rewatched this film before doing it. This is actually the last thing I rewatched a couple of days ago. So this came out 1st of January in the UK. I watched it, I think, the 2nd of January 2019. This is when I still lived in London. Holy moly, what a phenomenal film. I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. It's a period piece, and so I just don't like it. The wigs, the makeup, the kind of the big palatial estates. I just don't like it. For me, aesthetically, it's just, I don't like it. And then the speech and stuff. But this film doesn't really go into that kind of old-timey speech. It's a bit more modern in the way that the dialogue is presented. To a degree, it kind of still feels part of that world or that time period, I suppose. But it was just something that I thought, I'm not really going to enjoy this, but there's so much great talent involved. And the trailers did intrigue me, so I watched it, and it's very darkly funny and has 3 incredible performances wrapped up in it. But this was my number 1 of 2019 for months. and then something kind of knocked it off the top spot. Then it was like number 2 for like 6 months. Then it kind of got squeezed down to 3 and then 4, and I thought it really needs to be at the top. So this, as of like a week ago, this was like still in my top 5. Rewatched it again with Connie, and it's great, but I don't think it's a film I'm going to watch over and over again. I'm glad that I own it. I'll watch it again in the future for sure, but I don't think I'll watch it over and over again. And this is my favorite films list. This isn't like the best films of 2019, which I should say, if you want to check out kind of my thoughts on the best films that I saw in 2019, you can check out my RazorwireReviews Film Awards for 2019, which is me giving awards to what I think are the best films, or the best direction, the best cinematography, etc., etc. And the favorite is I don't think I included the favorite because it was kind of awards season-y, kind of keeping in with the the release dates and stuff. But the favorite is definitely one of the best films that I saw in 2019. But having rewatched it, I don't think it's one I'll go back to again and again and again. So it's fantastic. I think Emma Stone's great. I think that Rachel Weisz is awesome. Olivia Colman, incredible, ugly, dirty, grimy, kind of heartbreaking, kind of performance. There's so much wrapped up in that. And I think that all three of them, it's one of the things that I kind of call a symbiotic performance, where none of them really work without the other. That kind of the trifecta of those three actresses in the film really just make it pop. And the one thing I can't separate myself from when it comes to thinking about this movie, what kind of a sentence was that? I'll leave that one in. Is the fisheye lens stuff, which to me just doesn't work at all in this kind of movie, and it always throws me out of it. And it was even more apparent the second time. That's what brought it down a little bit, was the fisheye lens. It just looks like a 90s music video. I don't get it. It doesn't really work for me. It's an aesthetic choice that just doesn't seem to fit. But it's still a phenomenal film. Number 14 might be another controversial pick here, being so low on my list. Parasite, Bong Joon-ho's sure to be classic. Will be talked about for years to come. It made history at the Oscars this year. Rightfully so? Maybe. We'll see when I get further up this list, and maybe there's another film I think that kind of should have been winning all the awards that this one did. But that, again, this is all personal preference, though. I think Parasite is a phenomenal film. I should have seen Parasite again. It hasn't come out on Blu-ray yet, in the UK at least, so I haven't rewatched it yet. But it's as great as everyone says it is. You don't know where it's the best way to go, and it's completely blind. Great performances, great production design is really like that. The house is like a character, itself, which is something a lot of people say, and it kind of sounds wanky, but in this case, it really is kind of true. And the turns and the twists and the way it plays with class, it's funny, it's just gripping, it's fantastic, it's Parasite. Number 13, The Farewell, Lulu Wang's film, which I feel like should have got more attention, actually. I thought this was a phenomenal film. I loved this one. This is a really interesting story that is based on a very true story, and I guess kind of the true culture, in which this woman's grandmother in China, she lives in America now, and her family in China have kind of informed them that her grandmother is terminally ill, but they're not going to tell her that. So here's this woman who has cancer and is going to die very soon, but she's not being made aware of that because they don't want the person who is dying to have the burden of knowing they're going to die. They feel like they as a family have to take that burden upon them. And so, the character played by Awkwafina, she decides to go to visit her grandmother, even though they think that she might, spoil things and might say something. And kind of it's interesting where there's quite a bit of tension as to, at any point, Awkwafina's character could just say to her grandmother, "You're ill and you're going to die, and no one's telling you about it," and I don't agree with it, because she doesn't agree with it. So it's really gripping in that sense. That there's real levity to it. It's really fun and warm. Just the scene where her grandmother's out outside the kind of apartment block and doing her exercises, and Awkwafina starts drawing. There's just these wonderful little nuggets of. They just feel like she's plucked. It feels like Lulu Wang has plucked moments from her life and everyone's lives and just put them in the film. Just these little relatable moments, and then moments that are completely unrelatable, where you see a different side, a different culture in that respect, but also just the basic human element of how you would feel about something like this. And I just think it was a wonderful film. Number 12, and I'm kind of heartbroken that this has been kind of knocked out of my top 10, because I really wanted it to be in the top 10, but then I realized Luke, it's your imaginary list. It means absolutely nothing. Nevertheless, one of my favorites of 2019, the surprise favorite of 2019, Alita Battle Angel. I love this film. This is so much fun. It harkens back to, and there's been quite a few over the past. It seems like there's a running trend of films that I love, that are these big science fiction extravaganzas and fantasy extravaganzas that bomb at the box office. People say that they're shit. There's promising worlds to be explored that are new and different worlds than we see in the regular Marvel movies, which I love, but let's have some fresh stuff, And they just always seem to bomb and tank. People say they're crap. No one goes to watch them. They make no money. They cost studios money. And I love them. And they're cheesy. They harken back to like the films of the 90s I grew up on. I'm talking about films like Valerian, City of a Thousand Planets. Talking about films like Mortal Engines. And now for 2019 we had Alita Battle Angel. Would have loved to have seen a sequel to this. It's never going to happen, unfortunately. But what a ride, and I'm sure a lot of people were critical of this being adapted from the manga and the anime, but I feel like it really successfully translates the kind of storytelling you do see in anime and in manga. I don't know, and that's a big part of the film, is that she has those kind of anime-esque eyes, right? And from the trailers, it was like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about that. It doesn't look quite right. And then it plays out in motion, and it's one of the most staggering things I've ever seen. It's one of the great CGI characters of all time, which is a relatively new form of filmmaking. You go back, it's really the late 90s, so it's been around for pretty much 20 years. I'd say exactly 20 years, actually. 1999 was the first legit kind of featured character in a movie that was CGI, which was Jar Jar Binks in The Phantom Menace. Flash forward 20 years, and we have Alita. And the lifelikeness of that character was stunning. But, visually it's a great world. But the story was fun and cheesy as hell, and I loved that about it. It was awesome, and it's one I'll watch again and again, no doubt. Number 11, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Yes, my 2015 number 1 was Star Wars: The Force Awakens. My 2017 number 1 was Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And this year, The Rise of Skywalker breaks that continuity, and we go down 10 spots to number 11. I mean, it was just awful. I don't know what J.J. Abrams was thinking with Chris Terrio. I don't think they know how to write, honestly. I don't know why they were given money to make this. It was an abomination that borderline ruined my childhood. But it is number 11 in my list because I loved it. Of course I loved it. It was fucking awesome. Was it as good as The Last Jedi? No. Was it as good as and kind of as solid as The Force Awakens? I don't think so. So it's an intriguing thing where I feel like they shit the bed a little bit in terms of like trying to please everyone. And it's very busy, but the beats hits. They really land for me, and it was a great time at the movies. It was nowhere near as satisfying or as grand or as epic and as much of a final note as I feel like it could have been. But as a Star Wars fan, I was wholly satisfied. I loved the experience of seeing it in the cinema, and I'll watch it again and again. But it's also the end of the trilogy, and there's a bittersweetness to that, where a lot of times I don't feel like watching Return of the Jedi because it's the end, and there's a bittersweet sadness to it, and the same is with this, I think. But yeah, for me, it didn't quite crack the top 10, but it's definitely one of my favorite films of the year. And it's Star Wars. I'll kind of love it no matter what, but I did actually think it was a really damn good film, quite contrary to the popular general opinion, but it is my opinion. Number 10 is One Cut of the Dead. This is a Japanese film. I've forgotten the director's name, which really annoys me. But it came out in 2017 in some film festival, I think Japan in 2018, and then 2019 was when it started to roll out throughout the rest of the world. This was a super low budget film that really, it had no advertising budget apparently, and it was just word of mouth that just started snowballing, and it really picked up rightful momentum, I think. Because this is a real lo-fi film, and you just love to see where a director comes up with a really cool concept, executes it with very little resources, but because the vision is so strong and the idea is so good, the film just rips. Like it, oh my god, this, I wish I. This is one Cut of the Dead is a film I wish I could go back and watch for the first time every time. And it's another one. It's like Parasite, in that you should know nothing about it going into it, but in no way is it like Parasite in that in that regard. But just the structure of it is such a twist, like twice. It's like a movie within a movie, and there's another movie, and then at the end there's like another movie, and it makes the whole movie a movie. You know, it's a zombie comedy essentially, but there is so much more to it than that. I implore you to buy it. I think it's like maybe £10 or so. It's released from Third Window Films, and it's one of the most laugh out loud funny films I've seen in a very long time. I'd recommend watching it with someone. It's more of an experience that way, but boy, what a film. Couldn't not be in my top 10. Loved it. Number 9, it's a documentary entitled 63 Up, which at this point I feel like I've talked about this to death. I mean, I talked about it a lot on the Blu-ray Condition podcast that me and Graham from Man v Film run, which you can check out, cheap plug. Because the Blu-ray set came out with all of the films, including the most recent one, 63 Up, which was shown on ITV last year. So technically a TV documentary, but it is a film, and I think that, accumulatively, the whole series, the 7 Up series, is one of the greatest things done with the medium of film. And it's so simple and yet brilliant. And I'll try and be brief because I have talked about this a lot, but if you are unaware, the 7 Up series started in the 1960s in the UK, a documentary about the group of young kids who are 7 years old from varying class backgrounds in Britain, what they thought about life and love and all this sorts of things, and what they'd like to do when they were older, but kind of examining the different classes, the kids who came from money, the kids in kind of private schools, the kids in public schools from different parts of Britain. And it was kind of a snapshot of childhood and of Britain at the time. And then 7 years later, they decided to return to it in 7+7. And from then on, they continued to make a new film every 7 years. So then we had, would have been called 14 Up, but it was called 7+7. And then there was 21 Up, 28 Up, 35 Up, 42 Up, 49 Up, 56 Up, and then finally 63 Up. So the next one, if they do it, would be a nice round 70. But it feels like this might be the last one. The director has been constant throughout pretty much the entire series, Michael Apted. He was a researcher on the first film, took over directing on the second. So he's been doing this. I mean, he's getting on in his years now as well. So it's kind of it's almost like a ticking time bomb. Is there going to be time for the next one if he's still around? Does he have a contingency plan in place? And will many of the participants still be around? We've experienced the first death of the series by 63 Up. Someone had passed away. Mortality is very much all over this film, and that was one of the reasons I really was taken with it. Just seeing Tony at the beginning running around, like mimicking how he ran around when he was a young kid, just seeing him now as a 63-year-old man. You've taken this journey, and I would imagine it's so much more maybe emotional, but more poignant to people who've grown up with the series. I had been aware of it, and I'm going into too much detail, this is what I do, but I've been aware of it when I was a kid. I'd seen a bit of the 90s one, but it wasn't really until about 6 years ago that I actually sat down and watched most of the films. So it's almost been 7 years, so I almost filled the gap, but not quite. So this was one of those things. So, but it was a really moving experience to me. I found it emotional because you look at these kids and the kind of the bright eyes and the big ideas and the innocence of youth and the enjoyment and fun of youth, and then you look at people who've settled down and kind of they've slowed down, and some of them are sick and one of them has died, and it's not all doom and gloom, but it's very much like this snapshot of life, and the brilliance of it is the simplicity of it. These aren't particularly flashy documentaries. They're just how's your life going? And it's just ordinary people. None of them really have done something extraordinary or incredible and wow, and that's kind of, I think the beauty of it. It's life, captured in a way that has rarely been captured before, I think. Number 8, we have Joker. Yeah. It's a weird one, this. I think anyone who someone who watches films a lot and goes online a lot, If they say that they don't take anyone's outside opinion into account and it doesn't bother them, they don't think about it at all, they're lying. I think about Joker and I just think of instantly all the negativity, both before it came out, when it came out, since it came out, just people dunking on it and say it didn't deserve all of these Oscar nominations, and to an extent I agreed. But what a film. I saw it, I was disturbed, I thought that it was just so intense and dark, and then Connie wanted to see it, and I warned her that, this is a really deep, dark film, and afterwards she was like, oh, it was very dark. But my experience with it was very much coloured by Connie's experience of it, and I love this story, and it's probably a story I'll tell forever, because it's not often that this happens. She's a very tough critic on films. It takes a lot for her to be impressed. Not that I'm saying that that should be the case for other people, but for her opinion, it takes a lot to get her kind of jazzed up about a film. It needs to be really great for her. She's not one of those people who gives out 10 out of 10 scores like I do all the time. So it's a completely different kind of experience for her. Took her to see it. Had no idea what she thought. We went down the escalators. Chris from CM42 TV, if you're watching, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Didn't say anything, went all the way down the building, got outside. I went, well, what did you think about it? And she said, well, I'm not sure what I think and feel about what he did in the film, but I think it's probably one of the best films I've ever seen. And it completely shocked me. And we did the review and we got talking about it, and she got really passionate about the things that she loved about it. We went to see it again. So I've seen it 3 times in the cinema. I don't feel inclined to rewatch it just yet again, but I thought that it was fantastic. It's a deep, dark character study, and a lot of people have said that it's devoid of any depth and that it's a very shallow film. So there's all sorts of opinions, but I think that it's a really interesting story that has an incredible performance at the center of it. Because you take the idea of this comic book villain and you throw this hint of realism in there as to what would a character and a person like the Joker really be like if we just looked at him as a person. What makes him that crazy? What makes him snap? Like not getting thrown into a vat of acid, or not all these these backstories that might not be true. What makes him that person and that character? And there's all this ambiguity as to whether he even is the character of the Joker, or that he's maybe the guy that inspired the real Joker. There's so much you can dig into. There's all these clues or non-clues in the film. The music is haunting and really is like a big part of the film. So it's like a character in the film. I hate to use that wanky phrase, but to me it feels fitting. It's a huge part of the film, the score. It's a wonderful score, well deserving of winning the Oscar, I think, but it just it magnifies everything, and it dives deeper into the depth that I think the film already shows. But, Joaquin Phoenix, I think most people can agree, gave a great performance. I think a lot of people said that his performance is great, even if they thought the film was shit, which is a really weird one. Like, how can you enjoy it then? But I don't know. It's just really intense and unforgettable. And the way that some of that music is used, the kind of the Frank Sinatra stuff, I just think that it's so gripping, and I thought it's a great film. And everyone who disagrees can disagree, that's fine. But for me, it was absolutely one of the best cinema experiences of 2019 and one of my favorite films of 2019. Number 7. This is a film that I'm really glad I rewatched because it actually came out on Blu-ray with a new director's cut, which I'd like to do a separate video on at some point to speed this thing up just a little bit, because I could really get talking about the director's cut and things like that. But it was a film that I was not too excited about when it came out. The trailers didn't do much for me. But, I was slightly intrigued by the people involved and the story that it was continuing. It is Dr. Sleep by Mike Flanagan, adapted from the Stephen King sequel to his original novel, The Shining. And this film serves as both an adaptation of Dr. Sleep the book, but also a sequel to The Shining movie. Because in The Shining book, I believe, the Outlook Hotel burns to the ground. In Dr. Sleep the movie, the Outlook Hotel is still standing, and they revisit that quite heavily in the third act of the film. Spoilers. Saw it in the cinema, and I loved this film. I thought it felt like a novel. It felt like it was like 2.5 hours long. Just real character stuff. I loved the, I forget her name now. I think it's Kylie Curran, maybe. Not entirely sure. She plays the Abra, this girl who has The Shining, the same as Dan Torrance, and that character is played by Ewan McGregor, and he's really struggling as an adult. We follow that character. We even revisit the characters as they were in The Shining, but played by different actors, which I thought was a really great move, because if you bog it down in all this fancy CGI, a CGI Shelley Duvall and a CGI Jack Nicholson, then it's just it becomes more about the effect and not the story. And while I really hate stuff that's recast, I think for this it really worked, and they got people who it really felt natural, and the way that Flanagan used them was really concise. Like, we didn't see too much of them. I don't know, it just felt really well done. And then we have Rebecca Ferguson as this brilliant villain, and it just all seemed to work. I was so invested. And then the director's cut came out, and I watched it, and it made me love the film even more. And so it's like a 3-hour movie is the director's cut, and it feels even more like a novel, which is a weird, people say, what does, a film feeling like a novel feel like? Well, it feels like you're really taking time with these characters, and you get so much more depth than you can get in a 90-minute movie. Depends how you do it. There's all sorts of ways of doing it. A great kind of film can be made, and you can really get so much out of a film that has 90 minutes of just great character and great writing. Then you can have a 3-hour movie where the writing is really shallow, and you don't really feel connected to the characters. So it depends on how good the writing is and how good the performances are and everything like that, and the pacing and the editing. There's so many variables. But Dr. Sleep, the director's cut, really felt like a book. It felt like a really good book. Now, obviously, a book, I'm going far too far into this, but obviously with a really good book, you sit down and you have like a lot of time with it, and you dictate the pace. So you can just be flicking through the pages, and you really want to know what happens next, and you make it like this fast-paced thing. You can really take your time, a chapter every night. You can spread it out for a month if you wanted to, but it really felt like reading a good book, where you take your time with it, but you're still kind of like eagerly flicking the pages to see what happens next. The pacing was really great, and it doesn't feel like a 3-hour movie to me. I was really taken with this. I love it, and it definitely had to be in my top 10. Number 6 is another Netflix film, Marriage Story. This was initially much higher for me, and it's still pretty high on the top 10 list, but it initially went all the way up to the top pretty much. This is a brilliant drama, a film that I connected to quite deeply, having parents who divorced when I was a kid. Actually, no, not even when I was a kid. They divorced when I was a baby, so I wasn't really... I didn't get this experience, and certainly not the kind of, middle to upper class kind of, lawyers and all this hundreds of thousands of dollars and everything. And that very much speaks to the lifestyle of the characters who were in this movie. And that was kind of criticized, actually. People were saying that it was, it's not an experience that people can really relate to, because these are people who are spending all this money on lawyers and things, and it's just so far out of the realm of, the working class. I get that, but I still think the basic human element is absolutely there in this film, of these two people who have drifted apart for a number of reasons. And the film, for me, doesn't really present either of them in a completely solid light. There's no, against that black and white thing, shades of grey. I do think that more of the blame is placed on one character, but I also think that neither are portrayed to be perfect, and neither are portrayed to be the villain either. And it's a divorce. It's a divorce story, but it's called Marriage Story, which isn't really a spoiler, I don't think. But Adam Driver, he's just an amazing actor, and he does some great stuff in this. Scarlett Johansson really gets a proper movie for once. She's done so much stuff recently where I don't feel like she has enough to work with. I think she gave a great performance in Endgame, actually, but it's one of those things where she's in so many films, and it's usually in smaller parts, or parts where it's action oriented. She's just playing a mother, and she's still playing an actress, but there's something about it where it just felt refreshing to see her have a proper crack at a really good drama, and it is a really good drama. I think Laura Dern is overrated as hell in this film. I didn't really think she was that special. I love Laura Dern. She's great, and she wasn't bad, but it just seemed like a weird one to me. It seemed like okay, now's the time to give her a Lifetime Achievement Award, because I didn't feel... There were times when I felt like I was watching someone act in Marriage Story with Laura Dern. I said it, controversial, hot take. But the film itself, in relation to the main kind of relationships, and even the other actors in the film, I thought was wonderful. But as a boy whose parents had separated, and dealing with the... going between each parent and how that feels, and when the parents come together but they're not together, that really spoke to me, and I thought that the final note was really touching. And I just thought Adam Driver in particular, it's heartbreaking seeing what his character has to go through, even though he does things that are unquestionably bad, you know? That is the mark of a great story, when a character does some bad things, but you still root for them in some way, and you still feel the humanity coming out of them. And I think that is based on the really delicate performance that he gave. And it really bothered me when the film came out that everyone was just memeing and gifing the fight scene in the film. When I say fight scene, it's like a verbal fight, but this, this explosion that happens between the two characters. And it was all taken out of context, and it was all ridiculed, and oh my god, look how bad this acting is. It's like, yeah, because if you take a moment of someone screaming at someone from a film completely out of context, without the hour and a half that builds up to that point, it's going to look silly. But I mean, that scene hits you like a gut punch. There is the I don't know how to put this, but the scene when the social worker comes over, I mean, that is just one of the most like darkly funny and horrifying scenes I've seen in a few years. Just a completely, like, that scene is almost like its own short movie. But Marriage Story, loved it. Great film. Can't wait to revisit it at some point in the future. Number 5. We're into the top 5 now. This is the cream of the crop, as Macho Man Randy Savage would say. We have Knives Out. Rian Johnson, one of my favorite directors. I was really looking forward to this one. Not hugely, but, great cast. Whodunit, murder mystery. Sound like a lot of fun, and that is exactly what this film is. It is so much fun. Now, I went to see it in the cinema, and we had a bit of a weird experience because the trailers were not very long, and so most people hadn't come in. So the opening 10 minutes of the film, where we're introduced and set up of all the characters, people were just walking in for like the first 10 minutes, like crowds of people, and we're near the front, so they're just walking right in front of us. So we're just like, the movie's starting, we're just getting like, oh, someone stops there, they're waiting, they got their popcorn, they're moving, and everything's blocked, and it's like, for fuck, So that was kind of annoying. But I was able to enjoy the film, and people really got into it. It was really, really good. But then I saw it again at my local cinema, Snowcat Cinema, and it's a very small room, but they showed it and it sold out. And I was sat in the front, completely packed. And one of my favorite cinema experiences, I think, because I knew what was coming. Most people probably didn't. It felt like a lot of people hadn't seen it yet. And I had heard people say that, oh, Knives Out, when you see it again, it's incredible the second time. And I thought, really? In my mind, it was a really good murder mystery, really funny, really entertaining, just really, really good. But I felt like, well, when you know the twists, it's not going to have the same impact. But people kept saying, oh, no, seriously, the second time. I was like, eh. So I went to see it a second time, and holy shit did it play the second time around, because there's so many details that you now spot, and it's still so entertaining. It's really funny, and I think the script is just brilliant. I really do. It's just such a fun, character-driven movie. Great performances, particularly by Ana de Armas and Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc. It's just a great film. There's literally nothing wrong with it as far as I'm concerned, and I had such a good time with it. And I don't think there's too much more I can add. I do have the Blu-ray here. I don't know why I'm even doing this, but just to show you how much I love the film. I bought the 4K Deluxe Edition, even though I don't have a 4K player yet. But Knives Out, wonderful film. Not too much. It's just fun. And it's one that I'll go back to probably every year, every couple of years, and just have a damn good time. It's not trying to be anything. It's not trying to be an Oscar movie. It's not trying to, I mean, don't get me wrong. They're trying to make a great film, but it's, it's firmly settled in. Let's just have a good time for 2 hours. Let's just, let's have fun with this. It's a film that is designed to entertain and isn't trying to overreach too much. And I think in the end it ends up overreaching because it isn't overreaching, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I think it does reach a kind of next level of being great by not really trying to that much. It's just trying to be this fun kind of, again, family entertainment film. I think it really succeeds at that. Number 4 is Jojo Rabbit. Yeah, this won a lot of my awards in the RazorwireReviews Film Awards 2019. And for me, rightfully, I think this is one of the best films of 2019. I mean, what can I say about it? It's a film that is from one of my favorite directors, Taika Waititi. I love everything that he does. He's such a I don't know, such a talent. It's a really wanky thing to say, but man, he's so gifted in the way he's able to tell stories in such a unique and fun and entertaining way. And this film I was intrigued by, but wasn't sure about. And when I went to see it in the cinema, first half an hour, I really was like, I don't know if I like this. It's, it's set during World War II. It's about this young boy, Jojo Rabbit, who is an aspiring Nazi. Yeah. And his imaginary friend, who we see realized in live action, played by the director Taika Waititi himself, is Adolf Hitler. But this isn't really Hitler. This is a young boy who's kind of been brainwashed by, the Nazi movement to kind of believe that Jews are bad and that Jews are monsters, and he idolizes Adolf Hitler. And so it's what and the way that things are dealt with so flippantly just really threw me. I just thought this is kind of insensitive, and I just don't know how I feel about it. And then the main part of the story kicks in, which is about Jojo has a young girl living in the kind of walls, the crawl space of his house. His mother is helping this young Jew, and his relationship with this girl. And this girl is played by Thomasin McKenzie, who was in one of my favorite films of 2018, Leave No Trace. And once again, she leaves an indelible kind of imprint on my year of movies, because her performance in Jojo Rabbit was incredible. There's a fierceness to it, there is an anger to it, and there is this absolute delicateness and fragileness to it as well. It's just a wonderful performance, and I think she should have got some awards attention, but she was great, and the young boy who plays Jojo Rabbit is great, and that story is so moving and powerful, and it's wrapped up in this kind of satire that's taking the piss, but at the same time is, I don't know, I just feel like it's a film that shouldn't work, and it really works. It harkens back to films like The Great Dictator, with Chaplin playing Hitler, but this is like during World War. I mean, that The Great Dictator is crazy when you really think about it. But these kinds of satire that take these really heavy subject matters and issues, and then they tell something really like inappropriately entertaining, but then in the middle of it they have something that is really just like, I don't know, it's super powerful. Like at the end of I was rattled by the end of the film, because yeah, it's like, oh, he's playing Hitler and he's being all goofy and shit, but kind of minor spoilers here, but I never thought I'd get choked up by a young German boy saying "fuck off Hitler" to an imaginary Hitler and kicking him in the balls, and Hitler flies out of the window. Like it just makes no sense. It shouldn't work, and it absolutely does. Number 3 is Wild Rose. This is a British film starring Jessie Buckley. And out of the blue, I'd heard some good things about it. I saw the trailer. I wanted to go see it, but the show times were so small at Cineworld, and I just never got a chance to see it. So it came out on Sky Cinema. I watched it last year, towards the end of last year, and it's a perfect film. To me, it's one of those films that there's nothing wrong with it, and I just think it works on every level that it's trying to work at. It's about this young woman who has had a pretty rough life. She has a couple of kids. She's been in prison for a while. She's from Glasgow. I think it's from Glasgow. She's from Scotland. She comes out of prison and sees her kids, and they've been looked after by her mother, played by Julie Walters, who's phenomenal in the film. I think. Julie Walters in general in this, she just has such a motherly presence, but there's a sternness to it, to her character, that comes, by way of the fact that her daughter is very unruly, and she's a rebel. She's still young herself, but she has these kids. She's obviously had kids young, and she's had trouble with the law and everything. But in a sense, she's a criminal, but you really root for her. She is a phenomenal singer, and she is in real life, and that really makes the film pop. I think is that she can really sing. She's got a great voice, and she's a country singer, and she wants to make it. She wants to go to America. She wants to go to Nashville. That's the big dream. But she's come out of jail, and she needs to look after her kids, but she doesn't know how to be a mother. And so she's following this dream. She's being pulled in two directions. Her mother, Julie Walters, is like, you need to be here for your kids. And then she gets a job, and the person she's working for really thinks she has something, and it kind of goes in one direction. You think you know where it's going. You think it's this aspirational tale where there's this fairy tale fantasy ending, and in some ways maybe there is, but not in the way that you might expect. And I just thought that everything about it worked. It felt more real and down to earth than similar movies like this. You look at a film like A Star Is Born, which was great. I loved that film, but as someone who's British, I could really dig into this film so much more, and the characters just come off the screen even more. It doesn't feel like a Hollywood performance. It feels like a genuine, down to earth kind of relatable piece of storytelling to me personally. I just thought it was absolutely wonderful. Loved it. And for a while it was my number 2, but there we go. Wild Rose, definitely check it out if you haven't. It's a really good film. And this is where I'm going to be really hyping up stuff, so I want you to kind of be measured in your expectations. This isn't like one of the best films of the year, but it's one of my favorites, so I'll leave it there for that, for Wild Rose. I do implore you to check it out, though. Number 2 is the film that instantly became my number 1 in April, a year ago, 2019, and it stayed my number 1 for a full year. And I just couldn't see anything knocking this off the top spot. I was kind of keen and expectant and hopeful that The Rise of Skywalker would knock this film off the number 1 spot, but it didn't, not by a long shot. And I will unashamedly champion this film forever, I think. Interesting to me how this is one of the biggest films of all time, the biggest film of all time. It's Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame. Biggest film of all time, $3 billion, I think, worldwide at the box office. And it's the Avatar syndrome. People are like, it's amazing. They love it. They go see it again and again and again. It breaks all these records. And then 6 months later, it's like, oh my God, it's awful. Endgame. Cringe. Like, I don't get why people have done a U-turn on Endgame. Like, it's really strange. The internet loved it when it came out. And now people are really like, oh, it's one of the worst ones, really, isn't it? I don't know. I just don't know. This was one of the best cinema experiences of my entire life, not just the year. Saw it at the midnight, the midnight premiere. We saw Infinity War going into Endgame. Blew me away. And I think it was a Wednesday. Thursday, went to see it again. Friday, went to see it again. Saturday, went to see it again. Sunday, went to see it again. And it wasn't because I wanted to see the film over and over. It was, but I wanted to soak in that opening night, opening weekend, packed a room of people who'd never seen this film before, with all the shocking moments and the twists and the turns and the fan service. And it's something that I'll never get back. But I was able to go every night and just soak it in, and it was an amazing experience every time. The first time was the best, of course, but it was just like this electricity. These characters that have been built up for like 10 years, and some of them paid off in such beautiful ways. It's I just can't even put into words. I think that it is a brilliant film that is like so well executed through all 3 hours. It doesn't feel like a 3-hour movie. It takes the time to really dig into the fallout from Infinity War, and you get this wonderful heist movie in the middle, and then you get this balls to the wall huge battle sequence at the end. Is it the greatest battle sequence ever filmed? No, but the moments within the battle sequences are just some of the most jaw-dropping, amazing moments I've ever seen in a film. Martin Scorsese says these films aren't cinema, and I hate to bring that up, but whenever I think of this film, I think of that comment, and I think how unbelievably out of touch someone could be. Cinema is being moved by a film, right? If you watch a film, you don't really feel two ways about it. Is that cinema? Maybe not. But if you watch something and you feel something, it doesn't need to be this kind of artsy film that, gets deep into feeling. And I like films like that, don't get me wrong. But I feel like every genre should have like its kind of part in film history as something that is valuable and not lesser or more than anything else. There is a way to execute a brilliant masterpiece of a romantic comedy, or of a musical, or of a big budget, superhero blockbuster. When Captain America grabbed the hammer, it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Will it retain that same feeling when I watch it at home? No. But that initial reaction to it, I have it recorded somewhere, the audio. I never, I'll sometimes go, oh, in the cinema. It's kind of like a weird kind of like surprised kind of like laugh where I'm really like, oh my God. That's kind of the most I'll go. But when the hammer swung across the screen and it was being lifted, I was like, what? I had no idea where they were going with it. Maybe it was obvious to some. Captain America catches it. I just went, what the fuck? Out loud. Just goosebumps from head to toe. And then you got the whole portal sequence, on your left. Brilliant. It pays off so many things from the previous like 20 movies, even from like the Thor 2 and like the ones that people don't even really like that much. It just ties back to every single, even like tiny beats where Ant-Man and the Wasp, they're kind of on the battlefield, and he says something like, "Okay, Cap," and she gives him this look because she was teasing him about that in the previous movie. Just like all the little tiny things and then the big things that kind of come through. I could talk about the film forever, but it is just an amazing cinematic experience. It is cinema. It's everything about cinema. It's something that that gets the blood pumping. That's exciting. It isn't a shallow experience to me, because you build these characters up, and then when they die or when they they move on from the series and they kind of get their final note, it's beautiful and it makes you cry. That to me is the mark of the best films that have ever been made, because they connect with you and you feel something, and it goes beyond being just like flashy popcorn action. It's something more than that, and it is a 3-hour movie which isn't entirely filled with action, and it's hilarious as well. So that it just has a little bit of everything. I think that, well, I was going to say it doesn't have romance, but we do have that final scene with but yeah, I don't know. It just has a little bit of everything. To me, I think in years to come, it might be looked back on as a classic, I think. And if it isn't, it should be. It's an amazing film. But it wasn't my number one. What knocked it off the top spot? What could possibly knock Avengers Endgame off the top spot? I had no idea it was coming. Didn't think it would at all. But I'll be damned if it didn't. And let's get into it. The number one film of the year. But before we do, I need to address something here. It's kind of the elephant in the room, or the bear in the room, shall we say. Midsommar. I forgot to reintegrate this into my list. When I first saw this film last year, in the summer of 2019, I thought it was an incredible film that I thought I would probably never want to watch again, because it is so harrowing and like just dark, and just by the end you're just like, holy shit, that was fucked up. Do I ever want to see that again? It was brilliant, but do I want to watch it again? I don't know, So it went to the bottom of my... This was at the bottom of my list. Just as a placeholder, I didn't know where to put it. It's one of the best films of the year, no doubt. Amazing performance by Florence Pugh, and the way that it's shot, the way that it's a horror movie, where everything takes place in the day and it's bright and sunny and everyone's cheerful, but fucking deep dark shit is going on behind closed doors, or out in the open even. They're very... there's something like so unsettling about the way this film plays out. I think it's one of the best horror films I've ever seen because of that. But it does have those kind of gory, body horror-ish moments that I really find they make me queasy. But when the film came out on Blu-ray, it had a director's cut, and I thought, I'm going to have to watch the director's cut. So I watched it, and I really didn't think Connie would like this film, but she thought it was great. And watching it again, I realized this is a film I can watch again and again. Now that I know what's coming, I'm a little bit, I can stomach it a little bit more. But it really is just an amazing ride. Like, it's just... I don't know, it doesn't feel like... When I watched it again, I thought, oh god, the director's cut's nearly 3 hours long, but it didn't feel like it. It really didn't. We were watching it, and I paused it to go get a drink, and I was like, okay, we're probably like an hour and 10 minutes in. It was almost 2 hours into the movie. I thought, holy shit, we're nearly done. Like, it's breezing by, and it's just so well made. And I forgot to actually include it. It would be in my top 20 somewhere. Maybe I would take Vada by Agnes out of my top 20 somewhere, because much as I really enjoyed that film, I think this one's just a masterpiece, really. Maybe even top 10 worthy, I don't know. But well, anyway, so I had to mention that because I forgot to reintegrate it into my list after I'd seen the director's cut. Number one. And I now realize this video has probably gone at least an hour, for which I apologize. I can't stop talking about these things. It's what I do. What I like to do. Number one, my favorite film of 2019. My favorite film that came out in 2019, because I of course saw it, in April of 2020, but it was released in 2019. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, a film directed by Celine Sciamma, who, incidentally, I'd seen one of her films before on TV, like about 10 or 12 years ago, called Water Lilies, which I really liked. I didn't see all of it, but I really liked what I saw of it. Anyway, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. This is about a woman in the 18th century, I believe, who's a painter, and she gets hired to make a portrait of a woman who's about to be married. And before she goes off and gets married in this arranged marriage, she's going to have her portrait painted. But her mother's had a few people come over to do a portrait, and she just refuses. So she's kind of getting a brick wall here. And so she hires this woman, this painter, to come and do a portrait of my daughter, but she can't know that you're doing a portrait of her. So you'll be going with walks with her, and it's all set on this island with this big house, There's not really any people around for the most part, and it's a real solitary movie. And this painter is going on walks with this woman, this mysterious woman, and kind of looking at her features and trying to kind of like remember things and kind of quickly scroll down parts of her kind of anatomy and then to do her portrait. And the relationship that she forms with this woman, who is her subject, her unwilling subject, I suppose, that begins to grow. And that becomes the focus of the movie, is these two women who form a very strong bond. This is one of the best films I've ever seen. You know, I talk about, you know, there's not a thing wrong with it. You know, it's a perfect film. And this is a perfect film to me. And actually, on Twitter, there's been this big thing recently, like, pick 5 perfect films. And most people say, well, there isn't a perfect film. You know, and it's true. There is no perfect film. There's no perfect anything, except for maybe a perfect circle. That could pretty much be perfect. Maybe even that would be slightly off. There's no such thing as perfection when it comes to art. It doesn't exist. But we use these terms to say that it's as good as perfect, you know. But it doesn't sound very good when we say this film is as good as perfect. But it's perfect. There is nothing wrong with it for what it's trying to do. It's so flawlessly that's another phrase I've been using a lot in this video, for what it's trying to do. But it is. The cinematography is stunning. I mean, the place they chose to shoot this was incredible, but just like, I don't know, there's something about the texture of it. It was shot digitally, which surprised me. It seemed like it was shot on film, but there's a texture to it. And maybe it's just seeing the close-ups of the painting and kind of I can almost feel the canvas as she's painting this. And that side of it was great. Now something I've never done before. And I you know, I don't know why we're even going into this, but maybe this will convey to you just how much I love this film. I watched this film like 2 o'clock in the morning. It's on Mubi at the moment, by the way, so go check it out quick. There's like a 7-day trial. It's on Mubi, and I think the film's only around for like another 2 weeks or even a week. That's where I watched it. And I've been waiting for it for a long time, and I almost went to see it at the cinema, my local cinema. I'm so glad I didn't. And usually I love seeing films in the cinema. It's part of the experience, right? But to sit and watch this film in complete darkness on my own with headphones on in my living room at 2 o'clock in the morning, it was such an intimate experience. And after an hour, I paused the film and I just sat there and just thought, I don't want to continue watching. The first hour of this film has been so great, and I'm so captivated by it that I'm terrified of the idea that the second hour won't live up to the first. Because it would be heartbreaking if I'd seen one half of one of the best films I've ever seen, and then the rest of it plays out in a way that's not as satisfying. And I just walked around for a bit like, what do I do? And of course I sat down and watched the rest of it. And the second half was even better than the first. There is so much said in the eyes in this film. There's so much build-up. It reminds me a little bit of How I Met Your Mother. This is a really weird side tangent here, but there's a moment in the first season of How I Met Your Mother when Ted Mosby meets this girl at a wedding, and he really connects with her, and she goes on about how, you know, the excitement in, you know, kind of becoming attracted to someone and the build up to kissing them for the first time is better than the kiss itself. And she talks about it being the drum roll is more exciting and fulfilling than the actual act of kissing someone. Why don't we just have the drum roll, but not the actual, you know, consummation of that kiss? I don't know if you can say consummation with kiss, but you know what I mean. And that's what this film felt like for a lot of it, where it was just all in this build-up and these kind of stolen glances. And the two actresses, I mean, they're just... I haven't seen anything from either of them before, but they are firing on all cylinders in terms of what they're bringing to this story with their performances. And it plays to, you know, two women being attracted to each other in this time period. That's a huge part of it. And I don't want to go into too much more about it, but the final 15 minutes, I almost teared up just thinking about it. Like, it's so subtle yet powerful. And there was something about it in my life that I really connected to. And so, like, you know, not even the ending of the film, I was crying. And I've talked about this before. I think I talked about it in the last top films of the year video, because it was Disobedience, right? Which is my #1 film of last year. So two films that are, I've forgotten, there's a term for it, which is basically a story about, you know, lesbian lovers. And I've forgotten what the term is. But either way, a lesbian drama, romantic drama, has topped my list for 2 years in a row. And they both came out of nowhere. And they both kind of, I watched them late in the game, but they both left such an impression on me, and they both made me cry. I think there's something about two women being in love with each other. There's a tenderness to it that you just don't get with a traditional heterosexual romance. I mean, I guess it must be possible to capture that, but I don't want to say it's easier or harder, but I just with this kind of story, it just, I know there's something, it's more sensual and more, again, tender. I don't know, there's just something about it that I get drawn into, and everything else gets stripped away. It's just the core feelings of it. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a guy and I'm attracted to women, and so I'm not thinking about how I would feel in that situation. I'm just focusing on what the character. I don't know. It's really tricky to me. And full disclosure, a lot of men like seeing women with each other. For me, that genuinely isn't really a thing that kind of interests me that much in that way. So it really just strips away everything. Maybe that's because, in a traditional, like, heterosexual, romance in a film, I'm thinking from the guy's perspective, like, yeah, I can see falling in love with her and all this kind of stuff. Maybe I can see that too because I'm attracted to women, but I don't know, there's a frame of reference that I don't have, and so I'm really just looking at how they feel about each other. Maybe that's it, I don't know. But yeah, as I said, since I hit 30, I've started to actually, I don't want to get too much into this, but I've always been emotionally affected by films. I remember being in the cinema when I was a kid watching Castaway, 2000, so I was about 12 years old. My dad's on one side, his friend's on the other, and it's a scene where Helen Hunt and Tom Hanks are kind of reunited, spoilers, and they realize that they love each other, but after everything that's happened, they can't go back to the way things were, and it's a really emotional scene. And I was tearing up as a kid, and I felt so embarrassed that I was sat next to my dad and his friend, these kind of two symbols of, like, alpha male, like, I can't show that oh my God, like, I was mortified that I was being emotionally affected by this scene. Now I don't really care about that sort of thing, but also I've never understood people who cry at, like, actually sob. For a film, like, really, I don't know, and then it just started happening a little bit more, and I wonder if it's just going to keep escalating, and I'm just going to be like a weeping mess in the future. But this was the most I've quote unquote cried. I can tear up and let a tear roll any day of the week on a film for the most part. Well, maybe not that much, if it's the right film, but it's not something that I'm completely blocked off from or anything. I tear up. Look, I actually, I'm sorry, but I just feel like this is going into so many different tangents that it doesn't need to. But tangents are kind of what I do. I watched a wrestling match a couple of years ago where a guy picked another guy up on his shoulder and just started spinning around. It's called the airplane spin. It's mostly a comedic move. But the way that he did it and the way that he kept going and going and going, and the crowd just rose to their feet in a standing ovation. My eyes just started, like, glistening with tears. It's just, I get moved by stuff, But with this, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it was the closest to, like, sobbing I've ever been, and it was like it was heartbreaking, but it was kind of a release at the same time, and there was such a kind of I don't know, and then there's these two beats at the very end that are just like a gut punch of, like, emotion, and it's phenomenal. I'm terrified of seeing it again in case it doesn't live up to how amazing it was the first time, but there's no way it couldn't be the number one spot. Fantastic film. I think it's going to be one of my favorites of all time, but I think just based objectively, I think it's one of the best. It's shot beautifully. It's might be the best romance story I've ever seen. I don't know. I fully connected to it. There's such an intrigue to it. That first moment when she walks out of the house and the painter follows her and it's just the back of her head and the hood. There's a mystique to her already. And that mystique is so alluring. And even the actress who plays the maid, I thought was brilliant. And they're kind of the trio that formed throughout the film. Man, And one last, like I said, I'm glad I didn't watch it in the cinema because I would have been more self-conscious. I say I don't care about it, but I wouldn't feel the comfort and the... I wouldn't feel... Yeah, the comfort, I guess. No, there's another word for it. I wouldn't feel... I wouldn't feel like I could do it in a cinema the way that I could lying on my sofa at 4 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where it's... self-conscious, that's it. I wouldn't feel as self-conscious as I would in a cinema, I guess. Even though I probably would let a few tears roll, I don't know, maybe it would be something where it would have been great and I would have shared that experience with a group of people. That could have been really cool, but I think that, yeah, it felt like the stars aligned on that night because I saw that it was on Mubi and I was like, right, I really want to watch that, and I kept putting it off and putting it off. I was like, why are you putting it off? You know you want to watch it and you're really excited about seeing it, but the way that the film experience happened that night was just perfect to me. And that's the way I'm going to end this video with, I think, one of my favorite films ever. Thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. If you stayed this long, I feel like I've gone all over the place with this, and I guess this is me now. My top 20, films of the year is just going to be one of those clusterfucks where it's over an hour long. I can only apologize if you have stuck around this long and it's kind of been a bit of a chore. But I love talking about movies, I guess. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave your favorite films in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time. Hello and welcome to my top 20 films of... That can stand to go up just a little bit, I think. But it's still a phenomenal film. Number 18 is Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. Wow, this is a great film. I really enjoyed this one. It's been a topic of discussion. I'll leave that in for free. No, I won't. I'll start that again, actually. Because fuck it. I'm going crazy already.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.